I want to talk a little bit about something that I'm preparing for later on this week. I'm preparing to give a talk about using play therapy with children who've experienced domestic violence. And I was thinking about the process of domestic violence, the cycle of violence, and the power and control wheel, and things like that. And I was what I wanted to do was take that and demonstrate how you can see what has gone on in the family or what's going on in the family and see it in play therapy. So I want to share that with you. So I'm actually going to share the slide that I created for the presentation I'm doing and just go through it with you all and talk a little bit about it because I think sometimes we miss some of the links between what's happening out there and what's happening in here. So give me a minute and I'm going to share this with you. So here we go. So in terms of the cycle of domestic violence, there's three stages, and I know lots of you are familiar with this, but I'm going to break it down to what it looks like in play therapy. There's the tension building phase, there's the acute explosion phase, and there's the honeymoon phase. So that is what's happening in the home or in the relationship between the adults in the family. So what happens to kids? What are you likely to see during those phases? That's what I'm here to talk about. So in the tension building phase, you are likely to see these things show up in play therapy. How do I know this? Also, this is not based on research. So I want to be really clear about this. I know this from 30 something years of clinical experience doing play therapy and about 28, 29 years of being a play therapy supervisor and educator. And that is not just talking about play therapy. One of the things that I ask of my supervisees, sidebar, is that I get to see their work. So what am I seeing in that when kids are experiencing that tension building phase at home? Time after time, you see that children in and out of play therapy are more moody and irritable, that they are isolating. That can be also in and out of play therapy. So sometimes they're isolating within the play therapy. They're not engaging you verbally in their play in any kind of way. They move away from you versus keep connected to you by their physical attunement. You may see aggression, again, in and outside of play therapy. Their fears tend to go up. By that, they're afraid of more things. They're more sensitive to the feeling of fear. They can be more clingy with caregivers. They also can be more clingy with you, their teachers, other adults that they feel are safe. And you may see caretaking, again, both in and outside of play therapy. I think the really cool thing about this is thinking about the cycle of domestic violence and how children present is it gives us a lens to explain their behavior both in and outside of play therapy. In terms of when there's an acute explosion in the cycle of domestic violence, we also may see children isolating during this time. They would have difficulty sleeping. So in school and in play therapy, they might show up looking tired, acting the irritable that comes with being tired and not getting their sleep needs met. Their hygiene may be precarious. If they're old enough to care for themselves, they may not be caring for their own hygiene. If they're not old enough to care for themselves, their hygiene may be precarious because of the acute explosion. And their attentional deficits are going to be more overt. Any attentional deficits would be more overt during this time. So that will certainly show up in school, probably at home, also could be in play therapy. So where a child might typically stay with a play modality for 15 minutes, they're bouncing all around the room. They're less verbal, so their communication is going to pull back in terms of the verbal communication, and that's part of the isolating too. So you would see that you would see play, you would still see body language, you still see facial expressions, you would still see gestures and paraverbals, but the verbalizations are likely to be diminished. This is one of the reasons why play therapy works so well with children who have experienced or are experiencing domestic violence and their home. I would even say community violence to a certain level is the play gives them a vehicle to communicate about their lived experience. They are likely to come into the playroom dysregulated and be dysregulated outside of the playroom. And you may see some numbing. One of the ways children often play this out in play therapy is, the doctor will give you a shot, or they'll have you be the doctor and give them a shot, and they'll be like, I don't feel anything. That didn't even hurt. Um, but there might be some other numbing. They might fall on the playground and they won't experience pain. So you'll have physical numbing as well as emotional numbing as well. What happens when the adults in their lives are in the honeymoon stage? Anxiety. Anxiety in children often looks like irritability. So that's really important to remember. So you'll get anxiety, you'll get irritability, and you'll get the anxiety that looks like irritability. So this may just be a child who is just not feeling good, and like everything is kind of setting them off in ways that typically don't. Part of it is because in the honeymoon phase, they know what's coming next. They know that this honeymoon phase is not going to last. Actually, my experience in working with children and teenagers and adults suggests to me that the children and teenagers are more attuned to this honeymoon phase is not going to last forever than the adults in the relationship are. So you will get both the anxiety and the irritability. It's anticipatory. They know the tension building is going to show up next. In terms of acting out, behaviorally, they may just not be adhering to like the behavioral standards at home, at school, in the playroom. What would this look like? They would likely be testing out limits more than they would during any of the other two phases. So you can expect some of that. And then also during the honeymoon phase, you will have pedestaling. By pedestaling, I mean that they are really making the person who is the perpetrator of the domestic violence, um, putting them in a good light, right? So because that perpetrator is doing that, they will identify with that and they will see like how wonderful the perpetrator of the domestic violence is being. They may talk about it, they may play it out, they may write stories, make cards. I had a child just earlier this week making cards and invitations for the perpetrator of the domestic violence in their home. They're in honeymoon phase, right? So to think that that these things would be going on, tension building, acute explosion, honeymoon, the cycle of domestic violence would be going on, and the children would not be demonstrating the connection to the cycle, I think is we're not giving them enough credit for what their lived experience is. So I just thought I would share that with you because I'm getting ready to share it with a whole bunch of other people. And if you have questions or comments, I'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you for taking some time out of your day.